Yeah, you thought it got rid of me, didn't you? So, I'm going to talk about fake news, specifically how it spreads so successfully. So this is kind of a socio-technical talk looking at how it gets around the world and that combination of human and technical that makes it happen. So, if you were in here early, anyone not in here for the previous talk? Oh, yeah, okay. So I lecture in cyber psychology at Bournemouth University and programming and in recent rooms. There may be a little bit of fake news scattered through this talk here and there. You can spot it for yourself. So, I lecture in these things. People think it's about Freud and a couch and fluffy stuff. Actually, it's not. It's much more scientific than that. But I mentioned that anyway in previous talks. I won't go into that too much. But fake news, definitions here. When I talk about fake news, I mean the deliberately misleading stories designed to look like genuine news and actually not, like the news that Pope Francis was supporting the Donald Trump presidential campaign. I'm not talking about the ones like this, which are the spoofs and the parodies, like the claim that Nigel Farage was going to sing Happy Birthday, Mr. President, in his best Marilyn voice at the inauguration. So it's very much in the zeitgeist at the moment. It was the word of the year for Collins Dictionary in 2017, and they're talking about it in terms of being designed to mislead. It's not new, though. So word of the year in 2017, but fake news basically has been around for a long time in the form of different kinds of propaganda. For example, World War II, word was put around that carrots can help you see better in the dark. Because really, they wanted to cover up the invention of radar, which was really helping with airborne interception. But you don't want to give away the secret that you've got this thing that can see planes in the dark. If you can say your pilots have got super whizzy eyesight and that's why you're shooting them down, that's pretty good cover for it. So not true, and it goes back way beyond that. There are much older stories of fake news. For example, anyone heard the story of the woman who gave birth to rabbits somewhere in Dorset some years back? I mean, that's, yeah. I know, it was very much the news of the time. Various doctors went to see her and said, goodness, yes, she is giving birth to rabbits. She wasn't, but it's the idea of spreading a story is, yeah, as old as the hills. So, what's different now is that we've got a scenario where things are facilitated by computer technology, that's the cyber bit, but interacting with that human behavior that's been around for donkey's years, the psychology bit. So this is where I come in teaching the cyber psychology. So in terms of fake news, the technology means that it's really, really easy to disseminate it. Whereas in the olden days, you'd have needed to be hiring a town crier or something, or getting a pamphlet published on ye olde printing press, or somehow having to get what do you call it? A radio station set up, like a pirate radio signal or something, or broadcasting on TV, completely impossible. Getting video out there to people, not at all possible. Really big business to try and get a lot of information out to a lot of people. But also very easy to create now. So now I can create video on my laptop, no problem at all. I can print things easily. None of this business of going to the printers, getting the printing press set up with the old movable type or anything like that. Very, very easy to create content and very easy to spread it around the world. So, for example, I first gave this talk at the ACCU conference. Let's give it a quick plug, yeah? April next year, 2019, Bristol. There you go. Don't get a free ticket now. So, this was Russell Winder's tweet about it coming up and last minute buying tickets. So I saw that from Russell on Twitter. I clicked on that. Or another 100 people will have seen it as a result of me doing that. But then it will have spread on from there. So easily to lots of people. Whereas if I'd had to go tell 100 people at ACCU conference, by the time I'd got round them all, it would have been over. We'd be on to the next following years. So it spreads really easily. One person tells two people. You've got bigger networks than this, right? But even assuming a small percentage of them pass it on, it very rapidly expands in a kind of pattern that I know you'll recognise. Except I haven't quite got in all the twos because there isn't room in the end. Because ultimately, you end up with something like this, and I can't fit them all. It's from one person sharing it to their network, they then share it, even allowing for the fact that there's overlap between their networks, you know, have a lot of mutual friends. Nonetheless, it can reach ever such a lot of people, ever so fast. And you've probably noticed some of those things that come round about, I don't know, sometimes fake stories, sometimes true ones about lost kids and all sorts of things. The police help with this goes round the world in no time flat. You very rarely ever see a, oh, it's all right, that's been sorted, it's found, or no, that wasn't true. Those don't seem to spread at anything quite the same rate. The other thing I want to mention in the technology, but really only because it gives me an excuse to say zombie botnets, is that the spread of technology does make it possible to set things up such the whole production of news can be automated and the sending of stuff to places can be automated in a way that people don't even know is happening on their machines. But really, that is just the excuse for the zombies, I have to say. So, I said it's easier to create now, facilitated by technology. It's cheap, it's simple, it's accessible, and there's a motivation to do it as well, because if you're putting out a fake news story that's clickbait that people will visit, there's ad revenue to be had from doing it. So, my first job was working at a company doing broadcast equipment. They did video effects machines, which is actually what this one is. We also worked, what was this, 1987, on the world's first ever solid-state video recorder. Marvelous thing. This is working in an industry where they had big, high-quality tapes, and it would take like 10 seconds to run up a tape, which makes editing quite a complicated business. We had a rack about that size, so sort of about 18 inches cube-ish. Anyone like to hazard a guess, 1987, how many seconds of video we stored on there? Give me a starter for 10. So 60? Lower? Higher than 5? Higher than 10? 30 seconds. 30 seconds of video, which doesn't sound very useful a lot, but actually if you're editing an advert, it's enough to be useful. And we came in on this market at the point where it just about tipped over in the price of RAM to be feasible, and it was falling, so it was a more proof of concept and was likely to become more feasible. So, yeah, 1987, 30 seconds, big rack. Go on. 2018, on my phone, my telephone, my thing that you pick up and talk to people on. I can do this, and well, no, it's not 30 seconds, but considerably more than that. You know, easily, loads of capacity to do more, and just there's no barrier to entry like that, right? I'm not going to win prizes for video there. This one's not going to CAN, but which rather proves the point, doesn't it? Anybody can do it. So huge difference in the technology. Very, very easy to create and disseminate content. Click of a button, point of a quick camera at you, press record, wave like an idiot, press stop. So that's interacting with the human component that's been there all along. So we're going to look at why people are encountering this material. So you've got to come across it in the first place to be able to share it, right? So you see the material, then, okay, it might come across your path, like an email coming in, but you don't necessarily need to click on it. So why do people view it? And then having viewed it, why do they go on and share it? Doesn't always seem entirely logical. So the human component, the reason they encounter it, is the echo chamber effect. On the whole, I mean, there are a few individuals who try and avoid this to get the bigger picture, but mostly you're hearing from people you already know. You're following people whose interests you share. There's a lot of confirmation bias going on in there, and it's really hard to get exposed to alternate views unless you explicitly go and seek them out. And that's really quite hard because they can be really aggravating, I think, for lack of a better word to look at. So you're in the echo chamber. The reason I got the duck here, because this was a classic case of fake news, the story used to go around that duck quacks don't echo. And in fact, you stick a duck in an anechoic chamber and test it, and duck quacks do echo. So fake news that duck quacks can't echo. And also, a talk from me without ducks in it would be like a talk from Russell without squirrels in it, I think. So, another reason people encounter it, apart from the echo chamber, algorithms. Algorithms are there to try and make you click on more of it. They want to point you towards the ad revenue. It's really in their interests. So, somebody asked me last time I gave this talk, about whether or not there should be regulation managing people like Facebook. And I thought about it long and hard afterwards and thought, if they weren't editing, if they weren't interfering, they could perhaps argue that they're a platform. The moment they get in there and start changing what you see, just by prioritizing it, putting different things in there, injecting things into your timeline, they are editors. So their role, they cannot any longer claim they're a platform. So as far as I'm concerned, they're editors. You take it from there on the definition that they're editors, in my opinion. Only my opinion, not the opinion of my employer, et cetera, et cetera. So algorithms are there to try, and they're going to be looking at what you click on, and they're going to encourage that echo chamber effect by sending you more of that stuff that you've liked and clicked on. So it's really, if you thought you were going to avoid it, they'll be there to kind of try and make sure you don't. And with beautiful timing, just before I first gave this talk, that whole Facebook scandal came out, was that earlier? Yes, April this year, just to really hit home that the technology has changed in terms of disseminating stuff. So it's not quite so recent now, not quite so topical. So, okay, this stuff comes across your path, it lands in your inbox, it lands in your timeline. Why do you actually look at it? So I've already mentioned the confirmation bias. It's a cognitive bias, like I was talking about with the cyber psychology earlier. It's one of the things I teach in that course, because the way people think and take shortcuts is very important to the way they can be exploited in cybersecurity. There's ways of thinking that are just unconscious and fast and quick, but they're very powerful and are also hard to overcome because they're unconscious, about how we attend to and interpret information. So confirmation bias will make you, A, look to material that already matches your view in the first place, and then when you do read it, give it more credence than things that disagree with you. So that's going to lure you in, and then you're going to more likely to take on board what they've said. So, the other reason is groupthink. Once you're in that echo chamber and you've got people saying one thing, even if you've got some doubts about it and you're thinking differently, it's really hard to be the one that stands out. If everyone's piling in on your timeline saying, oh, yes, this is terrible, it's dreadful, it's quite hard to be the one who stands back and disagrees with it. In fact, there are a couple of people on a friend's timeline who occasionally crop up and do disagree, and it's quite interesting to see that, but it always gets a bit, oh, well, is it Godwin's law? Every discussion on the internet always ends up with someone saying someone's like Hitler. It always feels like it's headed that way. So it's really hard to be the one who stands out and disagrees with the crowd. Even if you disagree, you're more likely to disagree quietly than pile in a lot of the time. So having done that, it's come across your path, you've looked at it, but why share it with other people? You've looked at it, you've agreed with it, and you're taking it kind of on trust, maybe without too much critical thinking, but maybe, why should you share it? You've looked at it, it's been interesting, why pass it on to other people? You're without any kind of real credentials behind it. It's not guaranteed from a good sound source. It would make more sense to share things that you know are completely reliable. And maybe I'll just read things with interest but not pass them on. There's this concept of ideologically motivated cognition. So it's not about whether or not the stuff is right or meaningful or useful, but it's about signaling your identity as a member of that group. So by sharing the things with your social group that say, I am like you, I share your opinions, it's part of your building your identity as a member of that group. And in that respect, it's rational in a way that perhaps it might not be in terms of pure sort of logic about the content and the source of the content. So it is rational, but for a social reason rather than a cognitive one. So, to summarize that, fake news is very much facilitated by the technology. It's so easy to create and so easy to disseminate. Simple click, really, it's like signing a petition now is a simple click as well. There's no barrier to entry or to sharing that. So that's the new thing. It's interacting with human behavior that's been around for years. So you're seeing in your echo chamber kind of what's on the surface. So yes, just a gratuitous excuse for more ducks, really. But on the surface, you see duck. But actually, there's a lot happening underneath that you're not seeing. But you're seeing that nice, smooth, calm view of everyone else who agrees with you. And behind that, there's a whole other world of people with completely polar opposite opinions and all shades of opinion in between that you just don't get exposed to unless you go out and seek it, especially. And the second aspect of the human behavior is that it is rational in one definition, expressively rational, to share that, to be part of that flock. So back to the duck at the microphone. Thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to test yourself on your credulity for these things, there's a very nice test on the US election news stories, so you can see which ones you fall for. I did this and got one wrong and went, yeah, that's my confirmation bias at work. So it's a very easy one to try. Thank you for listening again.
So thank you very much, Gail, for stepping in and giving us the impromptu talk. Do we have any questions about fake news? Well, I'll come to you second.
Do you have any opinions on how we can tackle this problem? Either.
It's really hard because there's so much basic sort of human psychology. We're really good at kidding ourselves that it's really hard to break it. And if you're already at the point where you're seeking out other voices to question what you're saying, you're probably not part of the problem. So no, I haven't got an answer for it because it's been around for years. It's carried on, and now it's so easy. And also that the glamour of the exciting stories gets such big coverage. Like the Pope supporting Donald Trump story is a much more exciting story than, oh, this isn't true. No, if anyone's got any suggestions we could do with it, certainly we need it, right? But I mean, maybe a certain amount of maybe we're going through a really bad phase in history where there's sudden booming of availability of information and we haven't really learnt to deal with it yet. Maybe as time goes on, there'll be more critical thinking. We'll start to realise what idiots we've been. There'll be more critical thinking in schools and more learning to recognise it. In fact, there was something recently in the news about learning to recognise stuff. I can't remember what it was. So yeah, I think we're slowly getting there, but we're very, very young in this process, and we haven't caught up with what the technology's made happen yet. So there's hope, but it's going to be grassroots, I think, from learning. It'll be like learning to read and write and assess critically, I think, and that's going to take years, right? Does that answer your question? Well, yeah, it says no, I don't know, but yes.
Do I have another question?
Yeah, one at the back there.
Another question? I'm going to ask a question in between.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the rise of automated false news detection?
I think it's a good idea, actually, even if all it serves to do is alert people to the possibility to actually, because I offered you a quick cyber psychology lecture, and now you're going to get one. So the cognitive shortcuts, the heuristics, is a very fast, automatic, subconscious thing where you kind of learn patterns and things, and and it's very useful. It serves as well because if you paid attention to every single thing and every thread in the carpet and every single person in the room, your brain couldn't cope. It would explode. So we need to be able to kind of take shortcuts through things. But there's also a slower system where the clever front of your brain steps in and goes, hang on. It's a bit like when you see something that startles you, your self-preservation animal brain goes, ah, and jumps, and then the rest of your brain says, it's not a snake, it's a hose pipe. So if you can get people to engage that bit of their brain, so yeah, maybe that comes back to your question as well. If you can do anything that will make them stop and think, I mean, same with sort of phishing emails, you want them to not just click, but stop and think, then that's a start. If it can actually then train them by knowing what it's detecting and pointing out what is wrong in there. I've seen a very nice thing from Full Fact on Twitter, where they've got a very nice example of how to spot doctored photos, for example. So I think things are starting to happen. Anything that shows you the cues in a memorable way has got to be a good thing.
Before I hand over to the next question, I'm just going to plug my conference, Pi Data London, where we had Full Fact giving a keynote, I think that was 2 years ago, and that was a really nice keynote on the automated NLP side of the analysis on that. If anyone's interested, have a look on YouTube at the Pi Data TV channel.
Yeah, so we're speaking here as well, I think 2 years ago.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
They're great. Doing some good stuff with Python.
Enough plugging.
Don't mention ACCU.
Thank you for giving this impromptu talk.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So I was saying thank you for giving this impromptu talk. So I was going to ask, do we have any evidence on the impact of fake news?
I don't think I can answer that without going more political than I'd like to go on camera. Does that answer your question? But yes, I think there is. in 2 continents. Is that sufficiently diplomatic? I think you had one at the back earlier, and they got one up here. We're doing all right. All right.
See, Daniel has a question.
I'm quite impressed with my memory actually knowing what most of that was about.
What patterns exist in the kind of people who share fake news?
Actually, probably with some of the personality ones, the agreeableness. You know, have you heard of the big 5 personality traits? So there's neuroticism is one of them. Openness, agreeableness, the introversion, extroversion dimension, and one that I now can't remember for the life of me. So some of those are about how you interact with other people and wanting to share. So if your focus is on that sort of being friends with other people and sharing ideas with them, rather than being suspicious and critical and analytical, then you're more likely to just click on it without thinking. For example, I think there are probably many dimensions to it, but personality would be one of them. And probably just pure awareness, because if you've never encountered the idea that there is such a thing, and you've grown up with news sources being reasonably reliable, or the expectation that they are, kind of why would you question it almost? You know, so I think we're back to that education thing of people needing to know how very easy it is for people to tell you stuff. You know, it's like someone once said to me, well, you know, it's printed in a book, surely it's right. No, I mean, but yes, it's a bit of a harder barrier to entry because you've got to get a publisher to publish it, but it doesn't guarantee it's right because it's in a book. And you know, you scale that up for the internet, even less guarantee that it's accurate on the internet. So yeah, I'd go more personality, and I guess also that depending on how good you are at sort of spotting the automatic thinking and going, hang on a sec, but that's probably again about experience a bit. Because a lot of cognitive biases, again, there's one called availability bias, where it's much easier to call to mind something that's happened and think that's likely. So for example, if there's been a plane crash recently, people will be more alert to the risk of plane crashes and worried about that and think it's likely to happen. Whereas it's not been in the news. I mean, you know, the actual overall probability of it, really not very much different for them. But the availability of that information to them is makes it more salient. So if they're not hearing, if they're not learning through whichever, and they may well not within the echo chamber they're in, they may not be learning that things are fake, then they're not getting that education about it either. So lots of things all come together to kind of doom us, really, basically is what I'm saying there, isn't it? But I think over time we may improve.
Right, I think it's time to break for lunch. Let's thank Gail again.
Thank you.